Do you want to find a stress-free way to buy your next car? Start at CarMax and shop your way. If you want to browse with confidence, get pre-qualified online with no impact on your credit score and shop cars within your budget. From luxury cars to family rides, CarMax has options for almost every price range, including more than 25,000 cars priced under $25,000. So hey, want to get started? Just head to CarMax.com for details and get pre-qualified today. Want to drive? CarMax.
Hey listeners, this is Peter and welcome back to the History Shorts. Today's episode is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the world. Download Podcast Republic today, available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Today on History Shorts. If you asked Americans in early 1941 whether their country was at war, most would have to say no. Officially, the United States was still neutral. But high above the skies of China, American pilots were already fighting Japanese aircraft, flying missions that Washington publicly denied even existed. They called themselves the Flying Tigers, the first American volunteer group of the Republic of China Air Force. And before Pearl Harbor changed everything, these volunteers became one of the most famous air units of World War II. Our history brief today will highlight some recent history news. A quick word from our sponsors.
Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
This day in history. On March 9, 1862, the ironclad warship USS Monitor and the CSS Virginia clashed at the Battle of Hampton Roads during the Civil War. Though neither side claimed victory, the duel marked the end of wooden warships and the dawn of modern naval warfare. On March 9, 1959, the Barbie doll made her debut at the American International Toy Fair in New York City. The toy quickly became a cultural icon. Story of the day. By 1940, Japan had been at war in China for years. Cities were bombed, supply routes were threatened, and Chinese leader Chiang Kai-shek desperately needed help. The United States, however, was still officially neutral. President Franklin Roosevelt sympathized with China but faced strong domestic pressure to avoid any direct involvement in another overseas conflict. So, Washington found a workaround. Instead of sending U.S. military units, the government quietly supported a private arrangement. American pilots would resign their commissions, travel to China as civilians, and fly combat missions under Chinese authority. It was a legal gray area. Neutrality on paper, but intervention in practice. The man who shaped the Flying Tigers was Claire Lee Chennault, a retired U.S. Army Air Corps officer. Chennault had long argued that disciplined fighter tactics could defeat larger enemy formations, ideas many in the U.S. military had dismissed. In China, he found an opportunity to prove himself. Recruited by Chinese government as an advisor, Chennault trained pilots and studied Japanese air strategy closely. He believed Japan's strength lay in maneuverability and numbers, but also in predictable patterns. When the American Volunteer Group formed in 1941, Chennault became its commander. He drilled his pilots relentlessly, emphasizing teamwork, altitude advantage, and hit-and-run attacks rather than dogfighting. The American Volunteer Group consisted of about 100 pilots and 200 ground crew, many drawn from the U.S. Navy, Marine Corps, and Army Air Corps. They were technically civilians, but most were experienced military aviators. Their aircraft, the Curtiss P 40 Warhawk, was not the most agile fighter of the era, but it was fast in a dive, heavily armed, and rugged, qualities that Chanot believed would offset Japanese advantages. And then there was the paint. The shark mouth design on the nose of their planes, inspired partially by British units, and one that became one of the most recognizable symbols of the war. Propaganda embraced it, pilots leaned into it, and then the legend began to grow. The Flying Tigers saw their first combat action on December 20th, 1941, just days after the attack on Pearl Harbor brought the United States fully into the war. Japanese bombers approached the Chinese city of Kunming, and the AVG intercepted. Using Chanot's tactics, diving from higher altitude, striking quickly, and disintegrating before prolonged dogfights, they claimed multiple victories. Over the following months, the Flying Tigers defended supply routes, protected cities, and disrupted Japanese air operations. Their reported kill ratios became part of wartime lore. But historians still note that victory claims on all sides were often inflated, a reminder that wartime numbers require really careful interpretation. Flying Tiger's missions were dangerous not only because of enemy aircraft. Pilots operated from rough airfields, maintenance crews worked with limited spare parts. Fuel shortages and harsh weather added constant risk. When pilots were shut down, survival often depended on local Chinese civilians, many of whom risked brutal retaliation from Japanese forces for aiding downed airmen. The relationship between the AVG and Chinese communities became one of mutual dependence. And their story was thus never just American, it was deeply tied to China's struggle for survival. By mid 1942, the Flying Tigers had achieved near legendary status in American media. Newspapers portrayed them as daring mercenaries, battling overwhelming odds, and Hollywood would later amplify that image. But the historical reality is perhaps more nuanced. The AVG was effective, but it was not invincible. Their success owed as much to Chanot's tactical discipline as to individual heroism. And while they operated before America formally entered the war, they did so with quiet government backing, blurring the line between volunteering and official policy. The American Volunteer Group was always meant to be just temporary, however. In July 1942, the AVG was officially disbanded, replaced by the U.S. Army Air Force's China Air Task Force. Some pilots stayed on, while others returned home. They had fought during a moment when America's role in the war was still uncertain, when volunteers became symbols of resistance long before the full weight of U.S. industry and manpower finally arrived in Asia. The History Brief. Today on the History News, we're talking about a tiny piece of cardboard that has become one of the most coveted artifacts in American sports history and could soon sell for millions of dollars. A T206 Honus Wagner baseball card, one of the rarest trading cards ever produced, has just been put up for auction. And if history is any guide, collectors will be willing to pay between $5 to $7 million to own it. This card isn't just rare, it's quite legendary. Issued by the American Tobacco Company between 1909 and 1911 as part of the T206 series, the Wagner card was pulled from production early at the request of Honus Wagner himself, making only a tiny number ever printed. Experts estimate that roughly 50 authentic T206 Wagner cards still survive today, and every one is a treasure in the memorabilia world. What makes this particular card especially remarkable is its history. It has never before appeared on the market. It was discovered in a family collection kept by one owner's grandfather for 116 years and was unknown to collectors and experts until just last year. The card depicts Honus, the Flying Dutchman Wagner, a Hall of Fame outfielder who dominated baseball in the early 20th century and remains one of the sport's iconic figures. Early professional baseball cards like this one were not just collectibles, they were marketing tools inserted into cigarette packs, and Wagner's card stands out as one of the game's most famous misprints. Even though this newly auctioned card is in relatively poor condition, its rarity and provenance have generated enormous excitement among collectors. Past sales of T206 Wagner cards have set staggering prices. In 2021, one sold for about $6.6 million. And then in 2022, another authenticated example reached $7.25 million in a private sale. As auction day approaches, nearly every serious sports memorabilia collector will have their eye on this card, not simply as a pricey investment, but as a physical connection to the earliest era of America's pastime. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today and helping make this little show such a mighty success. If you are enjoying this show and would like to help with its production, you can always donate a few dollars at buymeacoffee.com or become a Patreon member to enjoy these episodes ad-free. Both links can be found on our website at www.historyshortspodcast.com. And don't forget to check out our new series on YouTube called 25 Events That Made America. Have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you all again tomorrow.